to listen to the Lapped Traffic Podcast.
What is up, Lap Traffic Nation? Welcome to episode 241 of the Lap Traffic Podcast. I am your host, the Professor Brandon Crowd, and tonight, the fourth installment of the J-Ski bonus shows with Dustin Albino. Sir, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing well, man. Haven't seen you in a while. We haven't done this in, 5 weeks? And a lot's happened since then, so I'm happy to be back on.
I'm happy, too. It's been a minute, and it was like, we had talked, and it was like, what's the right amount? Like 2 weeks, 3 week gap, and then we had chatted, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe if we do like a recap to the Dash4Cash event around the Xfinity series and kind of focus the show around that and throw some other things in the mix. And we both were like, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good idea.
Yeah, and then a couple other topics came out this week that we should probably hit on.
Yeah, I think so.
But yeah, I think we've had, since our last one, there's been 3 of the 4 Dash4Cash races. Obviously, the first one being at Martinsville. So I'm here for whatever you need, Dash4Cash Xfinity related.
Excellent. All right. Well, we'll get into it. But before we do, Lap Traffic Nation, this week's show is brought to you by Angry Brew. Roast the competition. Be the first to the finish line with 5 Lakes Angry Brew. Angry Brew is a massively caffeinated, amazingly tasting, high-octane, power-packed fuel to get you to the finish line. Get you to that 5 o'clock whistle every day. When you need a power-up, reach for Angry Brew. Coffee with a punch. Matt, Dustin, are you a coffee guy or no?
I absolutely am not coffee. I'm probably not the best person to talk about.
All right, so I'm not a big coffee guy either, but I gave it to my wife, who is a diehard coffee person, and she absolutely loved this stuff. It was great. Huge props to Angry Brew, who sent a massive giveaway box full of at least 30 Spencer Boyd hats, T-shirts, mugs. The first of 2 giveaways, one on Instagram, one on Twitter. Winners will be picked next Tuesday. They're going to be around for the rest of the season. Giveaways for the rest of the season from those guys. And a discount code is coming from them soon, too. So go check out Angry Brew. And, hey, the cool part is Michigan-based company, Michigan-based podcast. All about that for sure. Oh, well, man, listen, like you said, it's been a couple weeks. Last show was April 15th, a little over a month. I see you've been to some ball games, a race. Man, let's talk about our Tigers and Yankees for a minute, man. How about that?
Like I said, man, last time.
Right?
And we're on Zoom right now, so you can see me.
Yep.
For you listeners, but my hands, last time I was on, we were about even. The records were about even. And I said eventually the Yankees were going to go up.
Yep.
Tigers were going to go down.
Yep.
Guess what happened?
That's right. Well, not by any shock, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, for the Yankees, they just need to hit the ball, and they got off to a terrible record, their worst start in 20-something years. And then they found their offense, and now they're among the best teams in the league, I would say. It had a no-hitter last night. So, yes, very, very good stuff on the Yankees front. But, yes, I went to a ball game. It was just, it felt good to be – that was my first sporting event that I've been to outside of a race, covering one since, March of last year, right before the pandemic. Sure. The weekend before everything shut down, I was in Philly I was in Buffalo for SmackDown Friday night. Then Saturday night, I had tickets to a Flyers game. They played the Sabres in Philly. And then that Sunday, I was at the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view in Philly. So then everything shut down. So I had not been to a sporting event since then. So it just felt a little normal. It was reduced capacity, only 20% or 10%. It was 20%. But overall, I'm just happy that, things are starting to go back in the right direction.
Absolutely. You mentioned the Yankees no-hitter last night, and the night before that, the Tigers of all teams get a no-hitter with Spencer Turnbull, which was cool. I try to watch at least a few innings or at least have it on the radio. That was a West Coast game in Seattle, which I've actually been to a Tigers series out in Seattle, which that's a great stadium, great area out there. But yeah, so I missed that one. I was fast asleep while that one was going on. But it's cool. Have you ever been to a no-hit ball game?
So this is funny. So I have not. However, my sister and her fiance were at the Cleveland and Cincinnati no-hitter about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, awesome. Very
Yeah,
cool.
so
Very cool.
there's been a lot of no-hitters this year, 6 of them, 7 if you count Madison Bumgarner's 7-inning, it was a second game of a doubleheader.
Yeah.
So it was only 7 innings, and he threw a no-hitter, but I guess technicality that doesn't count.
Right. That's man. Yeah, that's an
argue
asterisk
that.
one. Yeah, I know. I would too.
Yeah.
Like you threw a game, man. Like that counts.
Yeah, and there's been 6 or 7 of them this year, depending on how you call it, and we're a month and a half into the year.
Yeah.
So pitching's definitely overshadowing the hitting this year.
I have been to an 8 1/3 and an 8 2/3 no-hit baseball games.
Wow.
One was it was on the one I vividly remember. It was Tigers, Minnesota. Justin Verlander on the mound. This is back when the Tigers are selling out Comerica Park on a Wednesday night because they're just dominating, and Joe Mauer hits a frickin' bloop single. I'm like, it pissed me off so bad. And then I was at another one. Anibal Sanchez had an 8 1/3 inning go. I forget what team that was though. But man, till this day, if I ever cross paths with Joe Mauer, he owes me a picture or something because he stole a no hitter from me in person. So.
Yeah, that sucks. Being so close. I mean, it sucks for you because it would be cool because there's, I say that there's been a lot of them this year, but truth, it's very hard to do. Obviously, it's not done very often.
No.
So to be at one and almost 2 of them, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Yep. Well, man, listen, you put out a new piece this week on Ryan Ellis, and I got to tell you, I loved that read. It was so awesome. I've gotten to know Ryan over the last couple years. He's been on the show. I've worked with him, scheduling like Matt D to come on the show, back in the day. And you knew he was a racer. You knew he had it in his blood. But your piece, man, it just gave such an in-depth perspective on some things that you would have never picked up crossing paths with him. So, tell everyone a little bit about it.
Yeah, thanks for the kind words and promoting it. I talked to Ryan last week, and like you said, he's a guy that's been around the sport really for, the better part of a decade now, whether, mostly part-time if he's driving at all. But between 2017 and 2020, he was in the marketing department for Go Fast Racing. And if you read the piece, it kind of tells itself, but that was really hard to be that close to the action and not actually being able to drive. And then also that deal wouldn't allow him to race other races, at least a full-time schedule. So, I feel like that's a story. He was very transparent, very honest, very open, which, as a journalist, come to me for that stuff. Like I love people who are open and comfortable talking about, their path and their story.
Absolutely.
And his story isn't one that's, comes to the forefront of a lot of people's mind because he's never been full-time. The most races he's ever ran in a full season is 16 in one series, which is 2016 in the Xfinity series. But yeah, there's so many stories like him out there of guys just kind of, persistence and never giving up and why don't you give up? And, I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned in that piece, just, from his quotes.
Absolutely. So if you haven't read it yet, get over to jayski.com, click on the Xfinity series, and it's on the Xfinity series news feed page. So definitely go check that out. Lap Traffic Nation, if you haven't tuned in to Tuesday's show, Jeff Striegel made his 16th appearance on the show. And Jeff and I, we'll talk for just an hour. And I go to Jeff, Jeff, we got, I got to wrap this thing up. And he goes, oh, I know, just when we get rolling, I go, Jeff, I've got Brian Newdorf, who's good for 10 minutes still to come on, and some listener calls. Like, I can't have this thing go over 90. I've been trying to cut the Tuesday shows between 75 and 90 minutes because last year there were a few that pushed the 2-hour mark, and that's just too long. Too long for a podcast, so Jeff and I could have talked for 2 hours. He just is so great. He's become such a good friend of the show, me personally, and he just is so generous with his time. We spent the first 15 minutes just talking about, the big win for him with the Advance My Track Challenge in Berlin Raceway. And that was cool to really get an inside perspective of him promoting and working as that track promoter and how much respect that track has throughout the racing community, which was really cool.
Yeah, Jeff's. So personally, like, I think I've only interacted with Jeff a few times, but I know at Dover last weekend, with MRN, he was talked about on the, I think it was the ARCA broadcast about that title. So very cool stuff. Is he your most frequent visitor of the podcast?
So it's kind of a toss up. The Orange Cone is pushing, I think, 17 times. Striegel's at 16. The PETM podcast, they're at like 18 or 19. And then if we drop off of that group, then I think it's like Tyler Riddick's been on 8 or 9 times. Custer's been on 6 or 7. So, but yeah, that key group is always good for a nice mix into the show every once in a while. So, and after 241 episodes, they all got 5% now. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say that adds up. 16%. 16 out of 240. That's like 7% or so.
Yeah, he's due for a check at some point in time. So go check out episode 240 if you haven't already. And coming up next Tuesday, CJ Wolliver from Fox is back, and CJ and I will be talking a lot of trucks, and of course recapping COTA next week. So that's what's happened. That's what's coming up. What about tonight? Well, Dustin and I, like I said, we're going to talk the Dash4Cash event. We'll break down some of the races, some of the winners. We'll talk Noah Gregson, some social media. We're going to talk Brad Keselowski. What's going on with that? That's kind of crazy. And then we got some of your guys' questions and comments to wrap things up. So, sir, what do you say? Let's kick this thing off. How do you want to do this? You want to talk? You want to go in order? Do you want to talk about your experience getting back to the racetrack the second time this year? How do you want to do it?
Sure, we can talk about Dover first.
Yeah. Let's do that. So, compare a little bit, if you will, the difference of, going to Daytona right when things are still kind of strict versus, now restrictions are starting to get a little bit more lax. Was there a difference from a media perspective?
Yeah, from a media perspective, kind of. I mean, unfortunately, I didn't go to Darlington. And Darlington, Charlotte coming up, there's certain tracks, I think COTA this weekend too, where, as someone in the media, you can get more access because NASCAR is starting to, ease back into it. For Dover, media were restricted into the press box. However, late last week, NASCAR announced that they are lifting the mask mandate outside, outside of, unless you're in an enclosed building.
Sure.
So I'll tell you what, fans took full advantage of that.
I believe it. I believe it.
Yeah. And I mean, rightfully so, I guess, if that's, that's their prerogative. If they want to do it, go for it. There was definitely some that, still weren't comfortable. And you see that every day, like at the gym just yesterday, as we speak, Wednesday, this is, at the gym here in Central New York, masks were, the mandate was lifted, and in all buildings, really, in closed buildings. And, personally, I'm still wearing a mask, but then you see other people who aren't. So it just, however you feel. But getting off that topic, as far as, comparing, there's a lot less media that go to Dover as opposed to Daytona 500, obviously.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So you don't see, maybe your frequent beat reporters that would go to Daytona, but also like and I've mentioned this before, the ROI is it's still not necessarily there. But I hope next time I go to a racetrack, which looks like it's going to be Mid-Ohio for the Xfinity race here in 3 weeks, that hopefully you get a little more access.
Awesome. Yeah. Right now it's looking like for me, Michigan's going to be my first race this year, and then hopefully Martinsville. But Martinsville is definitely going to be from a fan perspective, So, hopefully next year we get back to, the handful of racetracks at least and get to get back to doing some fun stuff with the show and all that kind of stuff. But, man, hopefully, hey, if you come out to Michigan, man, let me know. That's
I will. I met you there in 2018. It's the only time I've been to Michigan. Very cool facility, place, like I said, never been to before. So,
you and I got that map. We got to start putting some stickers on that map, man.
Yes, we talked about the map. I think it was the first time I was on this year.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing in Mid-Ohio. I've never been there, so I get to put a sticker on that big old map.
Yes. All right, man. So we'll get to the actual race about Dover here in just a minute. So let's when we look at the Dash4Cash here, I kind of want to get your perspective on. I want to say, well, I love the Dash for Cash event, the Triple Truck Challenge. I think we've talked before, I'm not a big fan of like the all-star stuff because it doesn't count towards a championship. It's some guy winning a check and doing a skills comp, whatever the case may be. And the Dash for Cash event for me is a combo of both, which I absolutely love. The race win counts towards the championship. And then, oh, by the way, there's a hell of a lot of money on the line for teams to win over a 4-week period. We went short track, we went intermediate, we went super speedway. We covered everything but a road course in 2021 this year, and we got some great quality racing. So, from your perspective, what's the Dash for Cash do from a fan, a draw, and the racing experience?
It's a good question. So I did a lot of work with Comcast and Xfinity over the last 3 years, and I actually asked Mike Titoian that same question, as a track promoter last week. He's the president of of Dover International Speedway, which obviously was the last Dash for Cash race last weekend. And essentially, as a promoter, it gives you it allows you to promote kind of a race within a race, another incentive to get to the racetrack, outside of Sunday, which at Dover was sold out. Saturday had a really good crowd. So I think as far as from a fan perspective, you get to see people really racing the hell out of each other. Like last weekend at Dover, Josh Berry, Justin Allgaier, two teammates in the Dash for Cash because of the results and how they finished the week prior at Darlington. They were racing the hell out of each other for second. $100,000 on the line, and that's a big deal for any team. Junior Motorsports swept the season, which that's never been done before for one company. But it's a race within a race, and it does so much for the local communities. If we're talking about Xfinity and Comcast, like they've opened up new lift zones this year. They're on pace to do over 1,000. That was their goal at the beginning of the year, which a lift zone essentially is a free. They're doing it in Dover in a community center. They opened one up in Martinsville too, but essentially what it is it's free Wi-Fi for, at-risk youth students or veterans. So it's really cool what Comcast does, giving back to the community. That's on that awesome. Side of it. Yeah. And then just those races are so good too. And Xfinity, it's the package they have. There's almost never a bad Xfinity race right now, which is a true testament to that series.
Absolutely. When we look at, we talked about Martinsville, and Martinsville was cool just because of the, not just because, but what added to Martinsville was the Cinderella story behind Josh Berry, which was awesome. So he wins the first Dash for Cash race, then ends up winning the last Dash for Cash in the 4-race series, which is cool. Talladega, for me, I loved Talladega because I thought it was great racing. We had some comers and goers, and I love the fact, for me personally, and I might take some heat for this, I love the fact that it ended 23 laps early. We didn't get a big one, and we didn't see a bunch of cars get tore up. I get that's the appeal, and that's what is the product of Darlington or Talladega and Daytona twice a year. I understand people tune in only because it's those races, and then I understand people don't tune in because it's those races. But I thought it was a great race that ended. We had a first-time winner out of it with Jeb Burton. Like, there was so much good to come out of a rain-shortened race, and we don't normally have that feeling.
Totally agree. The racing there, and especially, I hate to bring the Cup Series in this because we're talking about Xfinity right now, but the current package of super speedway racing, really between Cup and Xfinity, is so good, especially at the Cup level. Unfortunately, Joey Logano's car got off the ground a couple weeks ago, but when it comes to Xfinity, great race. Earlier in the year, Daytona was a pretty good race.
Yeah.
And like you said, and also what the Dash for Cash does is has a story within a race. Different storylines, really 4 different storylines. So for Jeb Burton, that was a huge win, obviously. And like you said, comers and goers, guys battling at the front that maybe, if you look at the final rundown, it might not show it, but there was guys battling at the front at times during the race that usually don't run there. It's the great equalizer, Daytona and Talladega. So yes, Talladega was great race, and so was the Cup race, I thought.
Yeah, oh, for sure. We look at the rundown from Talladega. We had Ryan Sieg, top 5 finish. We had Brandon Brown, Myatt Snyder, Tommy Joe with an 11th place finish, Timmy Hill 13th. So you definitely had a good handful of guys in the top 15 that wouldn't have ordinarily maybe gotten that top 15. If we had gotten down to the last 2 laps and something happens, maybe they don't get it. So it was just like I said, a great race. A lot of guys got a lot out of that race, and it wasn't just from a survival perspective. It was from a racing perspective.
Agreed 100%. And like you said, I totally agree. You don't need to have a big wreck and carnage for it to be a good super speedway race.
Yeah.
At all.
No.
At all. You don't need that.
No.
So I wish it made it to the end, but to your point, there probably would have been chaos and, a big wreck, 20 cars in there or whatever. So to that point, I am happy we didn't get that.
Right. Absolutely.
And for Jeb Burton, it was a huge win. Another guy, talking about Ryan Ellis earlier, who's just persistence. He's shown it throughout his whole career for the last 10 years when he had the ride with Turner Scott. And then, got booted because of sponsorship. Same thing happened at Petty's in the Xfinity Series. And could never, he's a guy who cold call sponsors, and a couple of those sponsors actually on his car. So, and they followed him from Childress to Junior to now colleague. I mean, it's a really cool story, and it was neat to see him get his first win.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk real quick. Darlington. I mean, Darlington speaks for itself, I feel like. And just to add when you think Darlington, you think old school and nostalgia. Justin Allgaier, veteran in the series, ran an old school style race and picked up the win at one of the crown jewels tracks. So Darlington was good. I enjoyed it. It's crazy to think, though, as much as I know Darlington is a good race, when I think about Martinsville, Talladega, and this past weekend Dover, Darlington's the one that's kind of like I don't have a good recollection on how that race went down at the moment. So
it's not good because I don't either.
All right, well, at least it's not me then.
But looking at the rundown, it was a good finish between the green white checkered, and a lot of people think green white checkers make or break a race. If it's a crappy race but a good green white checkered, well, it makes up for the bad race. No, it doesn't.
No.
But anyways, this was a good race from what I recall, and big win for Allgaier, getting his second win of the year. Started off kind of in a slump the first month or so, but has really turned it around. Had another good run at Dover, one of his best tracks. He's at 9 top. We're going to transition into Dover now, I'm sure, but 9 top 5s and 11 races there. His last 11 races. Allgaier and really junior motorsports as a whole has turned up the wick here in the last month or so.
Sure.
And Noah Graxon's starting to finally get finishes. I'm sure we'll talk about him in a little bit too because of Darlington. That was the big story afterwards.
Absolutely. I guess that's probably why we don't remember much about the race, because that situation kind of took over a good chunk of the recaps and all that afterwards. So.
And Josh Berry too, another good run. And he's had 2 second place finishes in a row now, dating back to Darlington.
Sure.
So he's shown a lot of improvement, a lot of maturity over the last 4 or 5 starts.
Yeah, no, for sure. Though I want to piggyback off what you said about Justin Allgaier for a second. And it's like, I love the fact he's got 2 wins in through 10 races here, because I feel like over the last, I don't know, maybe 3-4 years, we're getting to July and August, and we're still talking about when's Allgaier going to get that first win and crack through. And I feel like he got a pretty early win last year once we came back racing. And, it really just feels like he's starting to click on all cylinders. And that could be, I know, Cindric, the Dominator, right? Last year, doing well this year. But if Allgaier gets clicking on all cylinders, I don't think he's a sleeper that people are probably going to label him as a sleeper.
Yeah, he's not a sleeper. I mean, you look at you look since he's come back to Xfinity in 2016, he didn't win that year, made to the championship 4. 2017 won 2 races, made to the championship 4. 2018 was his best year ever in Xfinity, 5 wins, all in the regular season. Didn't make it to the championship 4 because if you remember, that was a year where there was absolute chaos in the Xfinity playoffs.
Yep.
Both he and Christopher Bell.
Oh, that's right.
Christopher Bell won 8 races that year, and he was in a must-win going into Phoenix, which was the cutoff race for Homestead. 2019, like you said, didn't win until Phoenix in the penultimate race of the year. And then last year, he didn't win until the 20th race of the year.
Oh,
so
that's later last year. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, the first one at Dover, then he swept the 2 at Richmond. And so to have 2 wins through 10 races, I mean, that's statistically the best start he's ever gotten off to.
Yeah.
So, and he tends to get better as the summer months come on. So I would expect him, I'm not going to say to have a career year because it's going to be hard to match 2018. But I could see him getting 4 or 5 race wins for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's talk about the race at Dover for a minute. From the bird's eye perspective there, we had our 2 races basically. We had a race within the race with the Dash4Cash. We had Austin Cindric really just going on a tear. Josh Berry made a bid at it. He almost won the race and the last one there. I want to talk about Ty Gibbs in a minute here once we get down to the playoffs and the outlook there. But, Brandon Brown, another top 10 finish there. We're really getting some guys with some solid finishes out there that are, really upping their game, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, this race was dominated by the top 3, Cindric, Berry, and Allgaier. And, really until the first three quarters of the races were dominated by Cindric and Berry. And once Cindric got the lead, there was no looking back. And his car, continually got better throughout the day. He was almost wrecked off turn 4 by Ty Gibbs. That was close, very close call. Cindric was none too pleased on the radio, but Cindric, 3 wins through 10 races. We're going to a road course this weekend. He's the favorite, obviously. Him and Almanger. There's no saying how many races he can win this year. I think it's going to be 10-ish, if not more.
Sure. That's realistic. It is. Okay. Noah Gragson, first ever 3-time winner Dash4Cash. Then he wasn't, but then he was. So, what was your take on what the interpretation of the post-race penalty was? And, we talked about it before we started recording. It's kind of closed-door stuff once the penalty gets announced. So take it from your perspective, what happened there?
It is, and hopefully I'm not speaking out of context. I wish we did have more access to not necessarily what the penalty was, but how I eventually got overturned. So, flashback to Saturday, from my perspective, uploading the points and all the PDFs on the J-Ski, it's 3 hours after the race, and there still isn't the points out. So something's up. And then I'd heard from a couple sources that it was the 9 car. And it turned out that, it was obviously at Darlington running up against the wall. He had made contact with the wall. So essentially that shifted the rear mounting of the car. And NASCAR, it fouled post-race inspection, which, we've seen that before. But to my knowledge, 4 days later, we've never seen one overturned. At least I haven't. So it's kind of confusing. I want more answers. I have more questions than I have answers,
right.
Truly.
Sure.
And I'd love to get those answers for everybody, but I don't know. It's you don't see that very often. Good for Gragson. It made him and the team really to look out to be like cheaters,
right?
Call a spade a spade.
Yeah,
but that wasn't the case. So yeah, it's.
I like the fact that one got overturned, right? Because for years, it looks like it's just a formality. If you get a penalty that's going to take away points, wins, fines, whatever the case may be. Oh, okay, you file your appeal, and okay, no shocker, penalty upheld, right? And to see one overturned now, whether or not it's 10 years from now, but it'll always be it gives credibility to filing that appeal, because now, hey, you know what? We can reference if we've got a point of, hey, NASCAR did overturn one. They did admit to being wrong, which I think in an era where, NASCAR takes so much heat, whether it's when to throw a caution, when not to throw a caution, the penalties, the rule, all that kind of stuff, to me that just, it's not going to correct a lot of things for a lot of people, I understand, but it at least adds a sense of, hey, yeah, let's do this, because there is a shot, albeit a small one.
And I think you used the right word there in credibility, because that's exactly what it brings to the appeal process, because the appeal is $2,500 straight up just to file the appeal. But for Gregson in Junior Motorsports, that's $100,000 investment. Technically $97,500.
Right. Yeah.
Because they won the Dash4Cash.
Yep.
But still, like that's something that if you feel strongly about, appeal it.
Yeah.
And that's what they did, and they won. So, yes, like you said, it does bring credibility to the appeals process.
Absolutely. All righty here. Let's do a little playoff picture recap. We got 16 races still to go in the regular season. Long way, I get. But here's the bummer. We've got a couple guys, some part-timers that have wins outside the top 12. Josh Berry, I think, is the most notable in terms of, we know he's only got that the first half of the season with Junior Motorsports. Do you think there's any possibility of him being able to run the rest of the season and being able to get into the playoffs with that win?
Barry, no, because he hasn't gotten why am I blanking on the word? Like an override in terms of a waiver. Okay. But same thing, obviously with Ty Gibbs, but Ty Gibbs has only ran 5 races? Yeah. And 5 races, he's 17th in points. That's incredible.
Yeah. Yep.
And he's only 53 points out of the playoffs. Yeah. So that's crazy. Obviously, he's got 4 top 5s in those 5 races. He's been on a roll. Probably the best 5-race stretch to start an Xfinity career ever. Right. I mean, if you really look down to it, that in terms of who's never had prior experience at the national level, crazy, unbelievable. It's crazy what he's doing. Yes. So, shout out to that team. But as far as the playoffs, I mean, you look at it, and Brandon Jones somehow finds himself on the bubble, and it's been either hit or absolute miss this year for 19 team. He's got 5 top 5s and then 5 finishes of 33rd or worse. Right. So it's not a surprise when you see those numbers that he sits on the bubble, but he's 9 points ahead of Brandon Brown. You got Riley Herbst, who's still out there. Granted, he's 34 points back. Herbst has been pretty big disappointment this year, I think. Even last year, I thought he proved a lot. He did a lot better last year in the 18 car than he's done in the 98 this year. And that car won 9 races last year with Chase Briscoe. So I thought, and Jeremy Clements continues to impress. Yes. 5 top 10s in 10 races. I mean, starting to head to some road courses, like, yeah, 5 of the next 11 races are on road courses. Obviously, that's his bread and butter. Got his first win 4 years ago at Road America. Yep. But even if he doesn't pick up a win, you're going to expect him to get some points and at least give himself a cushion. And I think, and we saw it last year. We really saw it 2 years ago. Stage racing, it adds so much with him, and he'll, as opposed to some drivers who are racing for the win, well, if he can't win, he's going to race for stage points. And so say he's going to finish, he's having a good day, finish 9th or 10th in the stage. Well, if they pit, he's now 2nd or 3rd. Right. So he's going to add some points up here, but 46 points to the good. That's really impressive for that team. And I would say he's been the biggest surprise of the year. Maybe, this is going on a limb, maybe in all of NASCAR, you could argue, but definitely in the Xfinity Series. Yeah, no, I'm with you there. All right, man, let's look ahead to this weekend. Going to Dakota for the first time in the NASCAR series here. All 3 series running. Rain is... I wrote down possible, but it's almost an inevitability, I think, at this point, which is a bummer. But, if it's wet and not a downpour, maybe we'll see some rain tires out there, which could make things interesting. We will. We will. I'm excited to see a new track, man. It's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be fun to see these guys, did the sim time pay off for them and all that good stuff. I love the fact we've got a couple Cup guys,
making some Xfinity starts. We've got Kevin Harvick running in a BJ McLeod car. We've got Paul Menard making a start this weekend, which is cool. So you guys, you'll have a lot going on in the Xfinity series this weekend.
Oh yeah, the Xfinity race for Saturday is absolutely stacked. You got, like you said, Harvick, Cole Custer's racing for Rick Ware Racing, Kyle Busch, Andy Lally, Road Course Ringers Racing. Boris said, granted it's with MBM Motorsports, but Road Ring, I talked to him yesterday for a story on NASCAR.com about why he's returning. This field, Austin Dillon. There's so many guys that we got to remember. There's only 36 guys that can make the field now because we have qualifying instead of 40. So we got 43 on the entry list. It's a big old chunk of cars going home. Seven of them.
Yeah, that's crazy. And that makes it exciting too.
It does. It does make it exciting. And those days are, at least at the cup level, have been long gone where you don't have cars, even, when we had qualifying, that are really going home. So it is exciting, and it's something different, unique. So I think the practices on Friday are going to be very important. Whether it rains or not, there's rain tires, so they'll race as long as it's not a downpour. But even in a downpour, we saw last year.
Or we ran it at the road course too.
Yeah, it was like a tsunami.
Yeah.
So I think we'll definitely get some racing this weekend, whether it's rain or shine. But I'm excited for this weekend. I don't think there's been. Oh man, it's been a long time since there's been so much hype for a new venue. I say venue because there's a lot of hype around the Bristol Dirt Race, obviously, this year. And rightfully so, but it's still at Bristol. This is a new venue. It's world class. Obviously, Formula One's raced there quite a bit. And now NASCAR is going there. In a big market, an uprising market, a market that's on the rise in Austin, Texas. So I'm very excited about this weekend.
I am with you too. All right, man, let's do a little social media. Everybody make sure you check out the website, thelaptrafficpodcast.com, Facebook, The Lap Traffic Podcast, TikTok, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff, all at Lap Traffic PC. Make sure you get over to jski.com. Check out Dustin's pieces under the Xfinity tab. Go follow Dustin at Dustin Albino on Twitter. Follow Jski at Jski. That one's an easy one. Don't forget about the bunch of giveaways going on. About 40 away from the Clint Boyer Lap Traffic swag pack giveaway. Next Tuesday, we'll have the Angry Brew Lap Traffic stuff given away there. So go tell your friends to follow all that good stuff. Check out the show. And of course, there's free stickers and koozies. All you got to do is fill out the contact page, and I'll send those out to you guys. And get over to angrybrew.com and go get yourself some coffee and get that extra punch. How was that, sir?
That was pretty good.
Thank you.
You're a professional at this now.
Oh, I don't know about that, but oh man. All right. Well, there is one piece of silly season news that we just have to talk about. I mentioned it briefly on the show on Tuesday, and that's the news that broke about Brad Keselowski, Roush Fenway Racing. Dustin, I only hit on what I knew, what was out there, and that's, there's the potential of Keselowski leaving Penske and getting partial ownership and driving at Roush next year. I haven't seen much else break outside of that. So if you've got anything you can share on that, or just give your opinion on how you think that could play out.
Yeah, it was a very surprising story Tuesday. When did I call it? Tuesday morning.
Yeah.
But as much as I say it's a surprise, it's kind of not, because Brad's been so vocal in the past about eventually wanting to get back into the ownership side, but not at trucks, which he's done in the past, obviously, and very successful too. A successful truck program, won multiple races with a bunch of drivers who are now at the Cup level. But he wanted to eventually turn his focus to Cup ownership. And so obviously, he re-signed last August. Yeah, I think it was August, late July, early August. 1-year contract with Penske. And you look at Brad, he's among the best drivers in the sport right now. 35 race wins. 2012 champion. The stats speak for themselves. So he wants and rightfully deserves a big contract. Now, in the days of having big contracts aren't necessarily there anymore. Team owners we've seen in the past, like Hendrick Motorsports, they in 2018 to replace Dale Jr. I mean, you thought like Matt Kenseth could be a guy, or any guy out there they'd go shopping for, and they went with Alex Bowman, who was in house, but a lot cheaper than someone like a Matt Kenseth. So. Yeah. As far as that, I think Keselowski wanted a big deal, and last year, 2 years ago, when his contract was coming up, didn't happen. So there's always kind of been like, I don't want to say a standoff between him and Penske, because he's still obviously very competitive and he's not going to give up on the team.
No,
that's not his nature. But there's been, I can't come up with the right word, but it's just. I guess standoffs,
yeah,
probably the correct term.
When you mentioned Bowman there, like, all right, that's to me, I'm gonna use the analogy of like, all right, well, we could go out and we could sign Aaron Rodgers, or we could get a rookie deal and save us a bunch of money and hope that he's Aaron Rodgers like, and HMS found that with Bowman, right? I mean, here we are, 2 wins, and well on his way, versus paying Matt Kenseth, who maybe he could have gotten a couple wins, but you knew you were paying for the name and the seat versus the longevity of someone building and continuing that legacy going forward.
Yeah, and it's an investment that you hope pays off. And for the Bowman side, it has paid off, obviously, with 2 wins this year, 4 on his career now over the last 2 years. So, going back to the Keselowski situation, though, it is a surprise, because when you think of Brad, you think of Penske. It's the only team he's ever been with at the Cup level since he was full-time. Starting in 2010, and 3rd year into the sport full-time, he wins the championship at the Cup level. And since then, he's always been a front runner. So it's a part of me is still, surprised, but then the other part of me is like, no, this is exactly what he wants. And so it's a good opportunity for Roush. It can bring some relevance back into their organization where, if we're being honest, they haven't really had they need it. They haven't had a front runner since 2014. They haven't won a race since 2017.
And it's crazy to think, when you look at the powerhouse that Roush, Carl Edwards, Greg Biffle, Matt Kenseth,
Kurt Busch,
like,
Mark,
and then just to go from the top and to just hit the bottom of that roller coaster and just almost flatline. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and so I think they need something like this, because then that also gives the team longevity, because, Jack Roush, and this is the case with a lot of owners, but they're up there in age. So Keselowski's late 30s. I mean, that's him taking over the team. That just makes sense from that standpoint. So
you almost look at it as like, we know, Jeff Gordon eventually going to take over at HMS, and Jeff got the big contracts and is going to probably get a nice payoff from the ownership side of things. But this could be with the change in sponsorship in the sport itself. You don't have that DuPont Chevrolet 36 races every single year. It's broken up just because of how much it does cost, the return of investment and all that, so it's a lot harder to get them in and to stay, so for that big driver, that could be the payday that they now look for is, okay, I'm going to race, 3-4 years, and then I want a cut of the ownership side of things, because that payday maybe isn't going to be there.
And this reminds me so much of Tony Stewart in 2008. And then middle of the year, he announces that he's going to go, he's going to buy in, be part owner of Gene Haas's team, which at the time was nothing. They were on track, performance was terrible. There was none.
Right.
But as soon as he gets there, they start getting some money behind him, and that's what you'd hope would happen with Roush, is that Keselowski can bring in some funding. Which to Roush's credit, they did sign Fastenal, and they announced that on Wednesday for another 3 years, and that's been their anchor sponsor for that 17 car. But you get a big name like Brad Keselowski, who's the first big name you've really had since Carl Edwards. But you can even really throw back to Matt Kenseth. And he left there in at the end of 2012.
Yeah.
And I say that because Carl, obviously never won a championship, but was always a contender. So it's a win-win, I think, for both sides. Something, I didn't expect it to come this early in the season.
No,
for something like this to be talked about.
And you got to think was that supposed to come out? Because they're not going to want to talk about it. Brad, anybody, that's all anybody's going to ask Brad now, unless he won the races. What can you tell? And he's just going to say, I'm focusing on the 2-car at Penske this week. We're not. I'll be shocked if we get anything new about that until much further into the end of the year, I would think.
And to that point, yesterday, it just so happened that on Monday, this Fastenal announcement was the Zoom call for it was made for Wednesday. They're going to announce it. And on Tuesday, this comes out about Brad. And so Steve Newmark's on the call. And so, of course, he's going to get asked about it. And Bob Pockris of Fox Sports asked him and essentially declined to answer, which, that's got to tell you that, he made it aware that there's definitely rumors swirling.
Right.
But he declined to comment. So, that's, you can take that with a grain of salt or however you will.
Yep.
You can leave it up for interpretation, but I would say if I had to bet, there's a very good chance we see Keselowski at Roush next year.
I would agree. And now, so to me, going into this year, it was like, okay, well, we got Matt DiBenedetto at Wood Brothers, and the thought is at the end of this year, he'll be out at the 21 so that Cindric can move up into the 21. Now, does this leave the possibility for Cindric to take over the 2 spot? Does that give the possibility of DiBenedetto to get a junior year at Wood Brothers Racing, or they give that opportunity to somebody else? That opens up some other opportunities already to speculate on for 2022.
It does, and I think you hit it head on. I think that would be the most logical scenario, where Cindric going in-house to Penske and DiBenedetto, who fits the Wood Brothers. The Wood Brothers like him. He likes the Wood Brothers. It just makes perfect sense to build on what you've had for 2 years and, potentially making the playoffs 2 years in a row. So that makes the most sense to me. But there's a reason I'm not an owner or anything. So.
Yes, sir. All right, man. Well, let's close this thing out with a couple listener-follower questions, and we'll wrap this thing up. Let's see here. First one, Pixie Doodle. How about drivers damaging cars during victory celebrations, making it impossible for a full post-race inspection to be done? We talked about this a little bit with the Noah Gregsa thing, but, you always got to wonder sometimes, did they back that thing up to the inside wall on that burnout on purpose?
It's bizarre because I want to say it was Cole Pern. It might not have been, though, so I don't want to get the name wrong. But I remember it was a couple of years ago, you heard over the radio. It might have been Ronnie Childers, too. But you heard the crew chief come over the radio and say, burn it down, don't be afraid to do this or that to the car, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And whenever Martin Truex Jr. can do, I'm assuming that's where this, question's based off of, because whenever he does a burnout, the rear quarter panels are shredded.
Yeah.
And the tires are gone.
Right.
So it is interesting, and especially with the domination that he put on, the ass whooping, as he called it, that he put on at Darlington. But I don't want to make too much out of it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Jared at Jared Reactor 19. How do you group the 18 ovals we'll see this year when it comes to the sorting of tracks in order to find similarities, correlations, and how certain drivers perform at certain types of tracks? Flat, low banked, semi-banked, high banked, all that good stuff.
Good question, Jared. Honestly, though, I think it boils down to the overall package, the rules package. I don't think necessarily the tracks matter anymore in terms of who does well at certain tracks, unless you're like a road course or a super speedway. And certainly, you expect certain drivers to do well, like Martin Truex Jr. You expected him to do well at Dover this past weekend. Unfortunately for him, he didn't. Right. But you expected him to kind of go out and dominate. But this year, the term parity has been thrown out there. I don't know if I agree with parity, because you still, there's been 10 different winners, yes, in 12 races, or 11, 10 different winners in 12 races, 13 races, my bad. But it's still the same teams are winning, Hendrick, Gibbs, all the big teams, Penske. The only team that's out of the ordinary is the 34 at Daytona, which was obviously Michael McDowell.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It looks to me like the best. If I had to pick like a championship 4 right now, it's too early in my opinion, but Truex, I would say Kyle Larson has so much speed. It's remarkable how he only has 1 win.
Yep.
Denny, because of consistency. If I had to throw a 4th in there right now, I'd go William Byron.
Yeah,
because he's just on a roll. He's the first Hendrick driver to have 11 top 10s in almost 20 years. Yeah. So pretty impressive streak he's on.
So we could go on two quick tangents that could really throw this thing into the time warp here, so we won't do that. But the one thing I would say in terms of parity, I used that exact word with Striegel on Tuesday, and he said, in his perspective, it's not parity, it's talent. And he used the example of, look at SHR, over the last few years, it's not like they're throwing the best equipment and putting the used stuff on Cole Custer's car and Chase Briscoe's car and Eric Almirola's car. No, it's the level of talent of that driver being able to go out there and get what he's able to out of the car. So,
and then there's racing luck involved too. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many, a lot of drivers don't believe in luck, or as Justin Allgaier would tell you, it's when execution meets, when preparation meets execution. But it, like Almirola, for instance, some of the stuff that's happened to him this year, you couldn't imagine that.
Right. That's like a brake baluster falling out of your car, right exactly. As you're rolling down pit road. All right.
Tough year for that team.
Jeff at JBev1789, given the updated rule today, thanks to Noah Gregson and Junior Motorsports, some of the best cars and rules made by teams and crew chiefs. First up, T-Rex and at Ray Evernham. We talked a little bit about the Gregson situation and all that kind of stuff. But, you've got the Tom Brady rule in football, right? The Tuck rule, there are so many nicknames that we give to things, and it's kind of like the tip of the hat, in my opinion.
It is, and it was ironic when it comes to the Gregson one that there was a rule made the following week about the rear of the car.
Right.
And like I said earlier, I just wish we had more insight on, to what went into the appeal. But like you said, it's behind closed doors, so we'll never know. But it would be nice if it was open to the public.
Absolutely, yes.
But yes, that's a good point. A lot of the rules, not a lot, some of the rules come because of some of the dominant cars, or cars that are, like he said, some of the best cars or rules are made by teams and crew chiefs.
Matt at Camper News Net, I'd love to hear about your experience at Dover this weekend. Matt was actually at Dover and was excited to hear the sounds on Sunday afternoon. I know you talked a little bit about it, but maybe just comment to how cool it was to see a grandstand full of people out there, man.
It was, and it almost. I was talking to Davey Siegel Sunday before the race, and it was very similar in terms of And maybe that's because we haven't seen a lot of people lately at racetracks, but it seemed like it was a very similar turnout to what a typical Dover race would be. And I say that, and there was only, I say only, but there's 20,000 people in attendance. It was essentially 33.3% full. And it was great to see, those people and fans back at the track. And, there's nothing like the smell of burnt rubber and gasoline.
Absolutely, man.
I think that's why a lot of people love this stuff. Just, to be at the track and to experience it all. And there's nothing like the sights, sounds, and smells, sensory overload, essentially, with NASCAR is.
Absolutely.
I always tell people, you can judge NASCAR or racing however you want, but once you get to the track, you're going to be hooked.
Yeah, it's no doubt.
Typically, I'm right.
Yeah, I've never met anybody that said I'm never coming back to one. So
Me neither.
Yep. And to close it out, Brian at Storm and B81, are you going to pick a regular or a ringer this weekend? Who joins Cindric as in the big three this year? Are there less or more than three in play this year?
So I'm assuming this is for Xfinity, even though Cindric's running both races. I'll pick Cindric to win the race. So I think that he'll get his 4th win of the year in 11 Xfinity races. Big three, I mean, we kind of hit on it earlier, but Allgaier, he's shown speed and that he can get into victory lane. Noah Gragson's shown speed, but it's almost like that 19 gets worse, as the race goes on. He leads a lot of laps early or runs up front early. And then for whatever reason, the finishes aren't exactly there. If I had to throw another name in there, though, along with Allgaier and Cindric, I would say AJ Allmendinger.
Yeah.
He's quietly fourth in points. He's had a really solid season outside of, the mistake, kind of the bonehead move. And I think he would tell you that, too, at the Daytona Road Course on the last lap of the first stage where he and Cindric wrecked.
Yep.
But super consistent. I think, his veteran savviness is going to pay off, and
as we hit 5 road courses over the next few races here,
should get a couple more wins.
Right.
So yes, I think he's going to build up some playoff points here very quickly.
Absolutely. All right, man. Well, and any final thoughts before we close this thing out here, man?
No, just go check out a lot of my content. I'm glad you brought up the Ryan Ellis piece earlier. I had a lot of fun with that one. Also, like I mentioned in passing, talked to Boris Said, who's racing the number 13 for MBM Motorsports. He's one of the drivers in the Xfinity Series race. He's one of the drivers that's going to have to qualify into the race. And he's raced at COTA, won at COTA quite a few times. It'll be fun to see if he can get that car into the show, underfunded car, and kind of how much road course ringers matter still, because you can put whoever you want in a car, they still got to go drive it.
That's
and
right.
Whether that's in a big team or a small team, and you got to think that his road ringer background or road course background should pay off and get them in the show. So that was a fun article too on NASCAR.com.
That's really cool. All right, Lap Traffic Nation, that is going to do it for episode 241 of the Lap Traffic Podcast. Go check out the website, thelaptrafficpodcast.com. Go follow on Twitter and Instagram at LapTrafficPC. Go follow Dustin at Dustin Albino and Jayski at Jayski. Huge thanks to Dustin for coming on. This was fun. Don't forget next Tuesday, CJ Wolliver. Don't get caught chasing a lucky dog. Tune in each and every week to the Lap Traffic Podcast. See ya.